Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds, nerdettes, and gamers of all ages. Last time when I said everybody was working for the weekend, I only meant that as a joke, but now I gotta clock in one more time and put more foot to more ass. We aren't even 24 hours out from the last one and I gotta get back on this. Well, you know what? It's time for choice words number 7, you unlucky number. Let's go. Alright, first up, just to start on something relatively lighthearted before we get even more serious, I want to talk about PlayStation Now. Frankly, well, how can I put this? The PlayStation Now service actually gives you the chance to, I guess, rent games on the, use a rental service on the PSN, but I mean, links in the info bar to the article on Kotaku. As it stands right now, PlayStation Now is a prime example of one of the ways that Sony really dropped the ball at E3. Because, okay, just to give you quick commentary, here's what I thought about the big conferences at E3. Microsoft, you don't get a cookie for catching up to where you should have been last year. You had some games that were interesting, but I mean, yeah, Sunset Overdrive's pretty hype. I'm pretty excited to see TJ Combo coming back to Killer Instinct. But other than that, you're still playing catch-up. You need to start getting on the ball. Sony. What can I say about Sony except trailers that the gaming public has already seen, and you spent far too much time talking stats and sales figures. E3 is an acronym that is supposed to stand for Electronic Entertainment Expo. What entertainment is there in basically masturbating to your stock portfolio? Get a grip, Sony, because if Microsoft is catching up to you, then you're in bad shape. Now, Nintendo didn't even have a physical press conference. Took half the time compared to Sony and to Microsoft, and just, ow. Sorry, hand's still a little sore from having to deck someone earlier. But consistently knocked it out of the park with games that their user base has been looking forward to, surprises that no one even knew was coming. Truckloads of footage on Smash, Hyrule Warriors, Bayonetta 2. Nintendo pretty much owned E3 with the way they handled themselves. But back to Sony screwing up. Again, the biggest, most brutal example of how Sony dropped the ball this year was PlayStation Now, and is attempting to try and push constant, all digital distribution of games. I mean, just taking a quick look at this. When you've got games like Final Fantasy 13-2 with a 3-month rental price point at $29.99, when you could just as easily find it at GameStop or Reset Games, or hell, you could even find it on Amazon for $17. Sure, it's a beta right now, but that pricing model looks like it's going to stay. And I swear, if this actually remains the way it is, then Sony may as well have just taken the nearest harpoon gun and shot themselves in the foot. It's really that simple. Sony, you're fucking up. You're fucking up. Stop it. Am I going to have to take the newspaper to your nose like a bad dog when you shit on the carpet? Stop it! Okay, all the lighthearted BS with game companies and E3 aside, we got some serious business to discuss. Gaming community, YouTube community, hell, America as a whole, we have got some serious business to discuss. Remember all the work that we had to put in to make sure that SOPA, the PIPA, and CISPA didn't see the light of day? Remember all the work, all the petitioning, all the shouting that we had to do to make sure that our privacy, be it online or otherwise, remained intact? Well, guess what? Courtesy of Senators Dianne Feinstein and Saxby Chambliss, CISPA is trying to make yet another comeback, but in a surprisingly ironic turn of honesty. Sorry, in a surprisingly ironic bout of honesty. They dropped one letter from the acronym. The P. The protection. Looks like all their cards are on the table now. This isn't even about protection. And the link for this, as with the others, as always, is going to be in the info bar. You need to read. You guys really need to read through this. Do as much research as you can and get yourselves rallied together. The next round of the fight is about to begin. It says on the article, and I'm quoting, "This go-around, Senators Dianne Feinstein of California and Saxby Chambliss of Georgia," yeah, looks like the South really is rising again, "have stripped out the mention of protection and rechristened their draft bill the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act." Second, third, fourth, fifth verse, same as the first. And yet, Dianne Feinstein is the one that wants to start howling about how at one point there was actually a drone flying around outside her place. And this is still coming on the heels of numerous revelations coming from Edward Snowden, coming from Chelsea Manning, coming from Glenn Greenwald. The open internet is still at risk. Our freedoms, our privacy is still at risk. And I've got a lot that I could say about Dianne Feinstein. There are portions, there are certain things that she's done while in office that I would commend her for, hands down. But when it comes to the digital age, when it comes to privacy, she is such a raging, flaming hypocrite. She's such a flaming hypocrite, I could take a stick and roast some freaking marshmallows next to her. But her and Chambliss actually trying to get together and basically resurrect the zombie that other jackass Senator Lamar Alexander was already trying to bring to the public. Look, there's really nothing more that I can say about this except get engaged. Contact your senators. Contact your congresspeople. Like I said, the next round of the fight is about to begin, if it hasn't already. Spread word about this. Spread the word. Once again, make your voices heard. Every single voice counts. And just do away with this bullshit for good. And now for something that's a little more gaming related, but also a little bit more editorial. Alright. Looking around the web just for gaming news articles and stuff, I came across one in particular that really brought into sharp focus a lot of the stigma around gaming. Like, pretty much whenever the mainstream media or even the gaming media actually covers something horrific that happens. Okay, not the gaming media so much, but mostly the mainstream media. Video games are usually one of the first things to blame. One of the first scapegoats that these empty suits and stuffed shirts decide they want to try and force onto the public. You know, that one chick that killed off like 19 people or something for a cult. They were talking about how she played Dark Souls and how that affected her. They tried talking about how the shooter in freaking Newtown, about how he liked playing, of all things, Dynasty Warriors, and how that contributed to him going in and shooting up the place. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if that now eternal virgin down in Santa Barbara was connected to video gaming in some way, shape, or form. Why? Because the mainstream media wants to do that. Because these days, video gaming is just like rock and roll was back in the day. Just like rap was back in the day. Just like cartoons and comic books were back in the day. All the old heads on TV can't understand why so many people are into it, so they try and blame it for all the ills of the world. And they are so busy with their heads crammed up their asses that all they can do is talk shit. But this article that I found, it really cuts to the heart of the matter. I'll read a quick excerpt from it, and you'll understand exactly where I'm going with this. I remember reading an article after the Newtown shooting tragedy. Speaking of Newtown, directing parents to bring their violent video games and other media to a little get-together where they could ditch the offensive stuff. I heard they were actually burning those games. How is it? How is that any different than a Nazi book burning? How is that helping? That's to blame? Video games are to blame? If I had been at that assembly, and yes, I absolutely agree with the author of this particular article. If I had been at that assembly I would have addressed every single parent who approached with a bevy of violent video games as follows. Why does your 10-year-old even have these? See, he or she isn't old enough to pay for them himself. Most stores won't sell them to him or her if the child is by themselves. So, yeah, it's you. You bought them for your child. Maybe we should burn you instead. Sometimes even the best parents can't avoid the terrible behavior of their children, but at the very least, could they at least act like parents? That particular excerpt stemmed from the author of this article, as he or she mentions in an anecdote, walking through the game section of his local Target store and hearing this child tell his mother, "Who are you to tell me what I can't play?" If you have a child being that disrespectful to you, if it has actually gotten to that point, then that's a failure of parenting to begin with. And with all this shit going on in the media about video games being blamed for damn near everything under the sun, video games, whether they be violent or otherwise, should be among the last thing to have any sort of blame put on it, unless the evidence is direct and irrefutable. You want to know why so many young people are losing their shit these days? Look to the home life. Look to the parents first. Because more often than not, it's a failure of parenting. Like, for example, it's a failure of parents not recognizing that the ESRB is actually there to help them. Why the hell do you think the ESRB was even established in the first place? And if parents are buying their underage children violent video games, okay, how can I put this? If your child starts acting like a fucking idiot, and the parents try to blame Grand Theft Auto, stop the tape for a second and think. A game named after a felony that your child was not old enough to buy. And you want to try and blame the game for their stupidity instead of taking a look in the mirror? You know what? I know the perfect note to end this on. So, yeah. I'm done. That's a wrap. This has been Blazing Ace Nelson with some more choice words for you. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Work hard, game harder, and remember, raise your kids, raise your kids.